I wouldn't like to keep you waiting. I see people gathering. Some housekeeping rules for our session this afternoon. You can see them here. Please be muted unless it's your turn to speak, and that includes the moderator, the speakers, and the audience during the Q&A session. Please turn off your camera on only when it's your turn to speak. Try to gather many questions for our presenters and share them through the chat function. And just to remind you that this session, along with the whole conference, is recorded and will be uploaded in the conference webpage. That being said, let us start. It's 4 o'clock, and I want to welcome you to this session, Energy Communities and Related Behavior Strategies to Energy Efficiency. I'm delighted to serve as your moderator today. I'm Louiza Papamikrouli. I'm currently serving as a Policy Planning Officer at the General Secretariat for Research and Innovation. And I was involved with the European Energy Network's activities for more than 15 years in its various working groups. We have prepared a very interesting session on the subject of energy communities. And we have an excellent pool of speakers joining us, talking on a variety of topics. And I see many familiar faces in the audience and many dear old colleagues. So let me see, I see that our presenters are here. So without further ado, I would like to start with the presentation of Dr. Kaisa Matschoss. She will guide us through social innovation in the energy field. Kaisa works as a university researcher at the University of Helsinki in the Center for Consumer Society Research. She's an adjunct professor at the University of Eastern Finland, and particular research focus relates to energy and sustainability issues. Her research interests lie in implementation and innovation in the energy sector, and the role of intermediary organizations. She also deals with tensions in energy transition, in sustainable household practices, and public engagement in sustainability. So, Kaisa, welcome. You're all ears.
Okay, I hope so. So thank you. My name is Kaisa Matschoss, and I'm presenting today, or the title of my presentation today is Drawing Policy Insights from Social Innovation Cases in the Energy Field. And my co-authors are Irmeli Mikkonen, Lea Günther, and Georgios Kokoufikis, Andreas Uilan, and Ingrida Murauskaite. I'm sorry, my co-authors, that I still say or pronounce your last names probably wrong, but I see that Georgios and Ingrida are also in the audience, so thank you very much for this joint research. So the background to our study is the current excessive resource use and climate change, and of course that they pose these great threats to the quality of life, also in the long term, and therefore we need solutions to construct the consumer society in a more sustainable way. And a lot of scholars have seen social innovations as an alternative to or complementary or an extension to technological innovation, as social innovation contributes to new social practices and institutions and systems. And some scholars also find that the ultimate goal of social innovation is social change and a desirable social change, with actions that take place at the level of collectives or groups. The aim of our study was twofold. We wanted to explore and demonstrate the potential role of social innovations in contributing towards low carbon transitions in the energy field. And also we want to discuss the policy implications of these cases. So the background or the methods and data, we analyzed data from 6 European social innovation cases, and we wanted to put them into a comparative setting. So the cases were selected from a long list of social innovation cases, and we had different criteria in order to kind of grasp as wide as possible knowledge based on them. So they represent different kinds of approaches to social innovation. We had bottom-up innovation cases and top-down innovation cases. We had small and large energy cooperatives among the cases. Then we also had innovation cases that were for-profit agenda and also for a non-for-profit agenda. And then we also wanted to have transnational and then also regional and local projects among our cases. And in addition to all of this, we wanted to have as broad as possible European spatial and cultural coverage. So we had cases from the east and from the south and from the north and so on. The data is mainly interviews. We also had some documents that we looked at. The documentation is not so very broad, so that's why our main source of information were the first-hand interviews. Those were executed in February, March in 2020. These are the cases that we looked at, but I'm not going to go there deeply here due to the time limit. But as you can see, we had Hungary, Bosnia-Herzegovina, United Kingdom. Then we had a broad case which was covered 16 European Union's member states. We had Spain, and then we also had a case from Germany. So when we looked at the findings in relation to transition targets, so we found that all the cases that we studied target both among those cases that we studied, there are both cases that target modernization of the existing structures and then also transformation of the existing structures, which means that there were cases that aim at improving the structures, but also cases that really aim at profoundly changing them. We also found that all cases target several transition objectives. So there is, we looked at these objectives like energy efficiency, renewable and local energy production, energy security, energy sufficiency, energy poverty, behavior change, and then also the transparency of energy prices. These were among those targets that we could identify in these cases. And we also found that in most of the cases, local energy production and renewable energy production, then also energy security go hand in hand. So this was kind of the combination of targets that some of the cases had jointly. Then we also found that the targets related to energy sufficiency go together with behavior changes. And then those cases that were mostly very local in character, those cases target energy poverty reduction very often. Then when we looked at our findings related to upscaling and impact, we found that while the local innovations seem to have a very small potential for scaling up, then nevertheless, even very local actions can be strongly linked to some actors that are transnational or national, such as global organizations or global movements, or then national funders, which helped to spread the gained knowledge and help these cases even to grow into global movements then further, which was the case, for instance, in the Earthship Brighton social innovation case. Then we also found that cooperatives can upscale kind of through replication to other sites within the country, which was the case of our social innovation case, GOI Ener in Spain. Then there were impacts that we could kind of more or less expect, like the increased employment, creation of new markets, improved energy efficiency, reduction of energy poverty, and advancement in circular economy. But there were also kind of unexpected impacts, like the strengthening of local economy by employing people from the region, and also distribution of tax payments locally. So these were not the initial targets of these cases, but they were kind of came on top of the targeted impacts. And then when we looked at policy implications, we found that the legislative and non-legislative policies really do play a crucial role in the diffusion of social innovations. And policy can support social innovation by providing financial support and subsidies, by non-monetary support, such as nudging, by positive reinforcement, using regulation to remove legal barriers, restructuring administrations, and streamlining administrative processes, and also by creating a level playing field. And then the role of regulation is particularly significant in the case of new market entrants and business model creation, such as is the case in these energy cooperatives or communities. And as these social innovation cases have first and foremost local impacts, local administrative capacities and the attitude of local governments really towards these social innovation cases really do play a role and can be a key success factor with these cases. Okay, so as a conclusion, social innovation cases that we looked at all exhibit attempts to involve the local community, regardless whether they are top-down or bottom-up initially. Civic engagement is a factor, particularly in emergence of bottom-up social innovations. We found out that most of the social innovation cases try to achieve emission reductions and changes in energy production. They want to create local value, and they want to also accomplish local and regional impacts. And while the purposeful and scaling up and dissemination is often not targeted, therefore the learning processes of those actors that are engaged and the networks that are created or are at play in the background play a crucial role in the creation of competence to reach the transition or the transformative effects and impacts that these cases target. So we do find that the social innovations in the energy field carry transition potential on a system level, even though they can be small. Okay, thank you. I think this was it. So this is the definition for social innovations that we use, but I think I will go to the questions. If I may, because I'm sorry, I have to leave this session in order to present in another session, but as I saw that my co-authors are in this session, so maybe they can participate in the questions and answers session at the end of this session. Thanks.
Okay, Kaisa, thank you very, very much for this interesting presentation. And we will address the questions to your co-authors then. And from this pan-European study, we will take you to Switzerland, and Darja Mihailova will present the preferences for configurations of positive energy districts. Dasha, the floor is yours.
So I'm going to be presenting the results of a discrete choice experiment that we conducted in Switzerland along with my colleagues, Ileana Schubert, Adan L. Martinez Cruz, Adam Heron, and Annika Sore. And we explored preferences for configurations of positive energy district. And this was conducted with University of Basel, SCC Yardcrest, and through the Smart Bees project, which focuses on positive energy districts. So I'm going to quickly give you a background on what a positive energy district is, since it's a central element that we'll be discussing in this presentation. So what is a PED? So it's a community which produces more energy than is consumed through renewable energy technology. And it's a place that couples built environment, sustainable production and consumption, and mobility to reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. This is a concept put forward by the EU Strategic Energy Technology Plan in 2018. The goal is to develop 100 PEDs in the EU by 2025. But you can see from this definition that it's pretty general, which leaves open a lot of possibilities for configurations of PEDs, and a number of PED projects or PED-like projects are described in these two resources you see here. So one is the JPI Urban Europe booklet on PEDs, and the other one is a deliverable created as part of the Smart Bees project on business models and consumer value propositions for PEDs. So it has a number of case studies. But because of the availability of different definitions and possibilities for PEDs, the aim of our research was to understand preferences for different configurations of PEDs so that we could better tailor better value propositions for future residents and encourage adoption and diffusion of these communities. And so essentially we conducted a segmentation study where we segmented a sample of respondents based on their preferences for PEDs and describe these segments according to a number of variables, which you see here. And yeah, just quickly over the methods, this discrete choice experiment was placed in the Swiss Household Energy Demand Survey, and we had 1,486 respondents. And yeah, some of our methods, we did the segmentation through latent class analysis, and we ran a mixed logit to understand the importance of attributes for PED choice. And finally, we described the segments in terms of demographics and values using a multinomial logit. So each respondent was placed into a scenario that occurs in the year 2030, where their neighborhood will become a PED, or they can choose to move into a different neighborhood. And we kind of described very generally what a PED could look like, the different elements that were the objectives of this type of community. And each respondent would see two choices that they could choose between. They did not see a none option. And it was also told to them that all costs would be covered. So all options would cost essentially the same and it would be affordable for them. And so in these hypothetical scenarios, each PED was described by 3 attributes. So one of them was the ownership of the renewable energy technology and engagement with it. Another attribute was mobility options, and this included public transport, private cars with low carbon requirements, or a shared fleet of electric vehicles, and finally communal spaces. And we came to these 3 attributes by looking at the different case studies in the resources I noted before, and then also through other research. And here you can see an example of something a respondent would see. So they would choose between 2 options. So each one represents a PED, and they would choose the one that they preferred. And so what did we find? Well, we found that respondents had a variety of preferences for these positive energy districts. So here you can see the utilities of the different attribute levels. So on the y-axis here represents the utility that a respondent gains from seeing the attribute level in the option. So for example, under mobility options, you can see segments 4 and 5 gained quite a lot of utility from seeing public transit in a PED option, whereas segments 1 through 3 preferred private cars with emissions restrictions. Under ownership of PV, you can see the purple line, so that represents segment 3, had basically gained a lot of utility from an individual ownership of PV. And to add to this, we also present information from importance scores. So these summarize the importance of the attribute to choice of PED as a whole. So for example, in mobility, you can see how much mobility was important in the choice of a PED for segment 1, whereas under PV ownership, you can see segment 3 found this attribute the most important in their PED choice versus the other segments. And finally, under shared spaces, you can see segment 5 in blue sees shared spaces as very important to their choice of PED relative to the other segments. So I'll give you a quick overview of each of the segments that we found. So the first one is the car defenders. We nicknamed this the car defender segment 1. Because they are strongly mobility driven. As we saw in the importance scores, they were also, with the results of the multinomial logit showed that they were likely to own a car, had higher income, they were unlikely to be homeowners and more likely to live in the countryside. And this was the largest segment that we saw. Another segment, segment 3, private and autonomous. So this was the segment that we saw had strong preferences were strongly driven by private ownership of PV. So they were also likely to be homeowners and had a higher average number of households in the segment equipped with solar panels relative to other segments. Segment 5, we nicknamed this one the community focus. So they found communal spaces very important relative to the other segments. They also had higher income. They were less likely to be car owners, less likely to be homeowners, more likely to have pro-environmental intentions, higher levels of altruistic values and lower levels of egoistic values. So this, you can see the segment preferences here, or this chart describes their preferences. So for example, community-focused preferred public transit and also cooperative ownership. We also had segment 2, so they preferred cooperative with car flexibility. This took up 21% of the sample. These respondents tended to be younger. They were likely to be car owners, likely to have a household of 3 or more people, and likely to live in German-speaking Switzerland. And finally, we had segment 4. So this segment, I think, was defined mostly by their negative utility from cooperative ownership of PV, and they also preferred public transit. They were likely to be older, likely to be lower income, less likely to be car owners, and also likely to be homeowners. And one common or one theme that we saw running through all of this was the importance of car ownership on segment affiliation. So here you can see the effect of car ownership on probability of belonging to a segment. So for the first 3, you can see that car ownership was very important to belonging to that segment, whereas the last 2 had lower percentages of car owners and were also less likely to, or they were also preferred PEDs that had public transit options. And I think it's also notable or of note to that EV car sharing did not experience a lot of, or just was not a preference of any of the segments. And so just to conclude very quickly, in development of PEDs, it's important to consider current mobility patterns as well as ways in which people's mobility patterns can be changed. And I guess this might seem obvious, but I think it's still important to stress this, that how can we meet the needs, mobility needs of those who don't live in the city and those with larger households. Also, we found that preference for private ownership of PV was high among those who are likely homeowners and also for those whose homes were equipped with solar panels. And so maybe this points to the fact that they're more familiar with the technology and they can envision it. So how can we help this visioning exercise for those who might not have the same capacity or control over PE or PV deployment. And finally, I think the most interesting for me was the community focus segment, because they sort of encompassed what I think of when I think of a PED, so a more holistic communal vision for living. And they might be more responsive to messages recalling social justice focus or an environmentally beneficial features. And yeah, so it's kind of a description of the segments we found. And yeah, thank you. And I'm happy to answer questions or if you have any recommendations or advice.
Thank you very much, Darja. I forgot to mention in the very beginning that you are an early stage researcher as part of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Action for the Smart BGs project, and people saw that in your signature on the presentation. So after Switzerland, we will go to one of the two presentations that's stem from the Horizon 2020 funded Newcomers project that will be delivered by Monica Musolino. Monica is a postdoctoral researcher at the CNR of Messina in Italy. She's working on the Newcomers project. She focuses on the social aspects related to the setup of energy communities. Her research interests concern the dynamics of participation and engagement of citizens in the processes of changing behaviors, sustainable consumption, and social acceptance of new energy technologies. She has previously conducted some research on community-based initiatives in context of urban segregation, housing, and energy poverty. And she will analyze the internal national gap between the north and the south of Italy in terms of energy communities. So the floor is yours, Monica.
Thank you for your patience. And so I'm going to show you the first findings of a comparative analysis. You can see, okay, of a comparative analysis that I'm carrying out with my colleagues Tino Nicita and Enrica D'Aleo on the socioeconomic, cultural, and historical factors that characterize the energy communities in two macro areas of Italy, the north and the south, and that determine their level of diffusion. Actually, the energy communities phenomenon in Italy is really recent. Indeed, the Italian Parliament approved a law on February 2020, which allows activating collective self-consumption from renewables and creating renewable energy communities. But these processes are not implemented in the same way and with the same degree of difficulty, despite this unique national legislation. Actually, Italy reveals a clear internal difference between north and south. The south is commonly named Mezzogiorno. Although a first analysis of this initiative planned and launched shows how these are widespread throughout the national territory. So in our research, we are monitoring the energy communities set up after this law and based on its definition, which is the follow. In the case of energy communities, the shareholders or members are persons, small and medium-sized enterprises, territorial or local authorities, including municipal administrations, and the participation in the renewable energy community cannot constitute the main commercial and industrial activity. So we will analyze the differences between north and south of the Italian country, carrying out a comparative analysis. We have selected these two large areas of the country because they traditionally present an internal gap with respect to the socioeconomic conditions of the inhabitants, in the industrial development and the productivity levels. Consequently, based on these structural differences, energy communities were also expected to assume different features, which will be tested using a series of indicators, such as such as the dimension, the number of initiatives and projects in relation to each area, the typology of actors involved, the typology of energy communities, and the funders. So in order to give you a quick overview of this internal gap in the country, I'm going to show you some of the main socioeconomic and macroeconomic indicators. For example, the changes in gross domestic product per area makes evident the different level of productivity between North and South in the last 12 years. In addition, the general amount of factories is strongly larger in the northern Italy rather than in the southern. As the data show, more than 50%, precisely 52 and 6% of the total number of Italian factories is placed in the northern area. With regard to the socio-economic conditions of the populations, the inhabitants of the Mezzogiorno of the South have an average income per capita significantly lower than this one of the northern people. But what about the poverty incidence amongst the population? Again, there is a structural and historical gap between northern and southern Italy in relation to the poverty degree of the population, as shown by the data of the last 15 years, as well as the data on the current situation of the 2 last years. Moreover, if we consider the diffusion of the non-profit organizations and the amount of employees and volunteers involved in this sector, we can see a higher concentration in the northern areas. But it's important to take into account a couple of general indicators in relation to the energy, for example, the energy consumption, which show that only 4 northern regions, which are the most productive of the country, consume an amount of electricity corresponding to 50% of the total energy consumption in Italy. In comparison with the latter, the energy consumption of the 4 biggest regions of the southern Italy is really lower. And the last data concerns the energy poverty. The map represents the different degrees of the energy poverty, showing again a strong concentration in the south. So, taking into consideration this general context, the creating process of energy communities in Italy is still in progress. At this stage, the energy communities are spread out in a balanced way between the north and south of the Italian country, at least with regard to the amount, to the number of these initiatives. However, some significant differences are emerging, as summarized in the following table, which is based on the selected indicators that I mentioned before. The most relevant differences concern the size, the dimensions of energy communities, and the typology of actors involved. Indeed, the initiatives set up in the north are revealing greater dimensions in relation to both the number of their members and the extension of the area concerned by the initiatives. Instead, in the south, the energy communities are generally smaller. With regard to the actors involved, instead, local authorities and especially the municipalities are playing the main role in both areas. However, an interesting difference concerns the presence of the companies as well as the universities, but more generally the research institutes in the north. They are totally absent in the south, where, on the other hand, a couple of NGOs are trying to create some bottom-up initiatives together with the local authorities. And this map sums up the main features that I mentioned, and it locates all the initiatives monitored in the country. So the different economic structure of the two areas is one of the main factors which can make more understandable the differences of the energy communities, especially with regard to the industrial and entrepreneurial structure. But another point very interesting, very important, is related to a socio-cultural factor, because the larger size and wider variety of actors composing energy communities in the north can be related to a more widespread culture and practices of cooperation, compared with the same indicators of the Mezzogiorno of the South, as evidenced earlier by the data on no-profit organizations. This socio-cultural factor of historical nature in the North is also associated with a higher level of trust in institutions and in cooperative activities. Another data of great interest concerns the prevalent typology of energy communities, because in both macro areas there is a prevalence of top-down experiences, but it's worth noting the presence of two bottom-up initiatives in two different southern regions, Campania and Sicily, promoted by two foundations. These foundations are working in order to tackle poverty more generally and energy poverty more specifically, and this is an aspect which is also consistent with the structural analysis of the greater socioeconomic fragility of the populations in the southern Italy. And one of these bottom-up energy communities based on Messina in Sicily is the main Italian case study within the Newcomers project on Horizon 2020 that analyzes nuclear energy communities from various angles. And so to conclude, according to these results, further research should focus on analyzing the success and the duration of these initiatives in relation to each area. Furthermore, it should be verified which actors are able to involve citizens in a more participatory and active way, and according to which social, cultural, and economic mechanism. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Monica. That will take us to Dr. Spyridon Karytsas' presentation. We were supposed to have a trip from Italy to Greece on the energy communities concept. Well, Dr. Karytsas specializes in renewable energy sources, economic and socioeconomic aspects. He's an economist from the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, with an MSc in Sustainable Development and a PhD in Economics and Management. He's currently conducting postdoctoral research on Greek energy communities with a 2-year scholarship from the State Scholarships Foundation in Greece. And he's a member of the Geothermal Department of the Center for Renewable Energy Source and Saving since 2009. He's also serving currently as an adjunct for the Harkopia University of Athens Economics and Sustainable Development Department. So with great Spyros, I'll give you the floor to present the determinants of citizens' participation and investments in energy communities in Greece.
Okay, thank you, Louisa. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you. So, as you said, I will be presenting the topic of determinants of citizens' participation and investment in energy community initiatives. This is a work that I have been performing within my postdoctoral research in collaboration with Professor Theodoropoulou from the Harkopio University. As an introduction, I would like to mention that reshaping societies into sustainable production and consumption models is a crucial issue of our times. Apart from changing the behavior at the individual level, changes at the systemic level through a collective action are required in order to address existing energy system challenges. Energy communities can transform the energy system from a centrally coordinated fossil fuel-powered system to a decentralized low-carbon system. Citizens' acceptance, support, and participation are, of course, essential for successfully managing these ongoing energy transformations. Concerning Greece, we should mention that energy communities were institutionalized just a few years ago in our country through Law 4513 of 2018. As stated in this law, energy communities are urban cooperatives with the objective of supporting social and solidarity economy and energy innovation, of addressing energy poverty, of utilizing renewable energy sources, electricity and heat cogeneration, rational energy use, energy efficiency, and sustainable transport management, and are also aiming at managing the demand, production, distribution, and supply of energy. It is important to mention that natural persons, legal entities under public and private law, and local and regional authorities can be members of the energy communities, while it is also important to mention that at least 50% plus one of the members should be located in the area where the energy community is based. Now, concerning the aim of our study, the present work which findings I will present afterwards is part of a project focused on examining the institution of energy communities in Greece in terms of citizens' views and behavior regarding awareness, participation, and investment in the energy communities, and addresses relevant issues that have not been explored in the past. In this context, the present work presents the performed literature review results, which focus on identifying, organizing, and assessing the available findings relevant to the themes under investigation. The first topics that we investigated within the literature review had to do with the structures, the participants, and the mission of energy community initiatives. Not focusing specifically to the Greek context, but in general, what has been examined, what has been written, what has been studied in general when referring to energy community initiatives. Concerning the structures, we could say that depending on different national policies, energy market conditions, and the level of the collective organization, energy communities may take various organizational forms, such as cooperatives, local social enterprises, or locally owned energy service companies. Referring to the participants, energy communities may embrace several different stakeholder types, such as local residents, local governments, NGOs, professionals, development companies, energy companies, banks, etc. We should mention that regardless of the organizational form, all these initiatives share the International Cooperative Alliance's cooperative principles, while additional characteristics common between all energy communities are their close relation to renewable energy sources, the democratic decision-making procedures, community participation in ownership, and an emphasis on the geographical distribution. In any case, energy communities have the main objectives which focus in which could be categorized into 5 groups, specifically economic, environmental, social, political, and infrastructural. Moving on, and referring to the identified policies that could enhance the development and diffusion of energy community initiatives, we should say that the role of these policies is essential, either talking about legislative, regulatory, or standardization frameworks, financial support tools, or awareness activities. However, we should note that it is challenging to compose policies that can foster all... Sorry? I hear someone. Okay, thank you. That it is difficult to formulate policies that can foster all different forms of energy communities. This means that specific policies will be more suitable for specific forms of energy communities in relation to other forms of energy communities. We also examined the benefits that can occur from the establishment of energy community initiatives. These benefits can be generally grouped into economic, environmental, and social. Some examples of economic benefits are the reinvestment of generated profits within the local community, increased revenues for the local residents and regional authorities, reduction of energy poverty, creation of local employment. When referring to environmental benefit, it is clear that through the production of renewable energy sources and the enhancement of energy savings, we can support climate, energy, environment, and environmental goals. And as a third aspect, when referring to social benefits, we could mention increased acceptance and diffusion of RES on a local level, enhancement of energy autonomy and security, reinforcement of community values, and promotion of democratic values and self-governance. Of course, apart from the benefits, we always have some barriers against energy community initiatives. Barriers could be categorized into economic, technical, social, and institutional. Economic nature barriers could include high investment costs and long payback periods. Technical barriers include lack of equipment, know-how, and expertise. Some examples of social-related challenges include the lack of community involvement, or also local opposition, and insufficient awareness and previous negative experience with cooperative structures. Finally, when referring to institutional barriers, we could note that centralized management and regulation of current energy markets may create specific obstacles for establishing and promoting energy communities. We could mention inefficient regulatory interventions, bureaucratic constraints, and unstable short-term policies. Now, concerning the theme of motives and other determinants, here we present the motives and determinants that have to do with citizens' involvement in energy communities expressed through volunteering, investing, or contributing through a managerial position. A first mention should be made to egoistic and ethical motives affecting these kinds of decisions, especially the investment-related ones. Egoistic motives are usually expressed through the return of investment. On the other side, individuals also are also moved by social and ethical norms, which can be distinguished between interpersonal trust, social recognition, and environmental concerns. All these motives can be affected by various factors, including the institutional framework, spatial factors, and perceived innovation adoption. Additionally, energy-related motives have been identified to affect individuals' decisions on energy communities. And based on previous research, these motives have been demonstrated as RES acceptance, energy autonomy, contribution to the energy transition, and influence on local energy policies. Finally, demographic and socioeconomic characteristics have to be taken under consideration. Such characteristics consist of age, gender, education, type of education, income, home ownership, and area of residence. Now, finally, we should mention that based on the literature review, we have identified the different motives, determinants, barriers, benefits, and other themes that have been investigated in the past. We have identified specific research gaps, not only for the case of Greece, but in general concerning the examination of energy communities in the context of participants' involvement. And we have specified some research questions to be investigated within the following steps of our research. We could mention that these research questions have to do with the level of awareness of the citizens, willingness to participate and invest, which activities would they prefer to be involved in, the different structures that they would prefer, and in general, the factors that affect these decisions, referring to benefits, barriers, determinants, etc. The research questions that have been identified will be examined in the next steps of our research through qualitative and quantitative analysis. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Spyros. Well, indeed, very interesting research questions. And second newcomers project presentation for the day from Stephan Sommer. Stephan has been working in the Department of Environment and Resources at RWI Leibniz Institute for Economic Research since 2013. He completed his PhD in economics at Ruhr University Bochum in October 2018. In the summer term of 2020, Stephan took over an acting professorship for economics at Bochum University of Applied Sciences, and his research interests include behavioral economics, applied econometrics and environmental resource and energy economics. So Stephan will tackle energy conservation in relation to energy communities based on a real case study. Stephan, where are you?
Thank you for the nice introduction, Louisa, and thanks, Spyros, for the nice previous talk, because that allows me to spend less time on defining energy communities and talking about potential benefits and challenges related with energy communities. I would like to present very preliminary results of the EU project called Newcomers, as Louisa said. And this is joint work with two other co-workers from RWI, Mark and Lucas, and Julia, who's the head of the head of the Newcomers project, and Lorenz Götter from the University of Bochum. These results I'm going to show are very preliminary. They are just very freshly. So the data just came in, and it's a very fresh analysis. not even the co-authors have seen most of the analysis, so you can just blame me in case there's something wrong with it, or you have comments. It's all my my ado here. So, as we all know, on this conference here, in the recent years, citizen-led energy communities have emerged. Spyros has talked a great deal about it. We all know that in the EU, citizens will play a larger role in the energy provision and energy consumption. The centralistic energy system will be disrupted also by these citizen-led energy communities, with prosumers coming onto the market, and communities as joint producers and consumers of electricity. Spyros also mentioned a number of reasons or rationales for this kind of behavior or development. The aim is to take away pressure from the electricity grid, but also promote renewable energy, and then also all the social, economic and other environmental benefits that are related to the implementation of energy communities. There is some literature on energy communities. I only mentioned two studies here, for instance, by Hoppe and co-authors, who conduct a survey in a Belgian and French community. And they, for instance, show that the membership in this energy community reduced electricity consumption. Well, it's survey-based, but still the effects were substantial. And then Werner and co-authors analyzed a peer-to-peer trading community in Switzerland, which is very technology intensive, using blockchain technologies. And they also, they're still in the analysis, and will probably soon come out with some results concerning the conservation effects. And there are a few more studies, but all of these studies share one drawback, and that is that people can self-select into these communities. So this is something called the selection bias in the literature. So you could imagine very easily that people who are already aware of the energy, well, in general, but also maybe aware of energy conservation, tend to select into these communities. And we tried to tackle this problem of this bias in the empirical literature by creating exogenously an energy community here within the Newcomers project, partnering with the Slovenian electricity supplier. And specifically, it will be a virtual energy community. And you all know there are a million different kinds of energy communities, and we focus here on a virtual energy community. And this is very roughly the research plan. You see, it started in the mid last year and is still ongoing research until, let's say, June this year. And the ultimate aim of this research project is not only to look at conservation effects for electricity or energy, but also we want to look at the conservation of water usage. And for this, we employ a very sophisticated smart shower head that is able to give real-time feedback. This is the second part of the analysis, where we switched on this real-time feedback like very recently, only in March. And I will show you the analysis which we have done so far, excluding this shower behavior, where we only focus on the electricity conservation here. Yet the aim that we have regarding the conservation of water also restricts us a little bit in the sample size, because of course these appliances are expensive, and so we end up with a sample of about 300 households in our study, which we will now observe for about a year regarding the electricity and shower behavior. And to select the participating households, we conducted a survey as a first step in like June, July 2020. And we invited about 10,000 households to participate in the survey, and about 1,000 of them replied to the survey, which is a relatively large response rate for such an invitation to a survey. And then of these, about 600 households also indicated that they wanted to take part in the study and get this fancy shower head. And yeah, our budget was limited, so we restricted ourselves to about 300 households, and then monitor the electricity consumption. And in mid-December, sort of, we split the sample into groups, where one we started to call then the energy community, and the other one serves as a control group. And both groups during the entire period receive information from us via a portal that we initiated, where we provide energy tips and some feedback on their consumption behavior. And in addition, this energy community, or among the members of this energy community, we try to emerge this feeling of belonging to an energy community by different kinds of steps. I'm going to show you an example later, but that involves, for instance, the possibility to chat with each other, and a map that shows where the other members are located, and so on. So in the survey, we collected a lot of data. This is just an extraction from it. So we collected data on socioeconomic characteristics, electrical equipment, and attitudes, for instance, environmental attitudes, but also social attitudes and social concern, and other scales. And the main purpose of this table here is just to show you that the randomization into the two groups worked very well. We do not find significant differences across these two groups in basically any of the control variables. Then, as I said, in December 2020, in December 2020, we split the groups. The portal I mentioned earlier went online already beforehand. And you can see two examples of what the participants of the study can see there. For instance, they get feedback on the electricity consumption, and a comparison also to other study participants. And in the community group, people have this community dashboard where they can discuss about the tips, the energy saving tips we provide them, or vote in the polls and whatsoever. We have to admit that the communication has not been so strong on this platform. But we can talk about that maybe later. First, I want to show you some very basic results, as I mentioned. So our main focus here in this presentation is the electricity consumption, and we measure it by a smart meter appliance on a 15 minutes interval. And for this graph here, I aggregated them to a daily level. And we see here that the pre-trends, or the trends before the implementation of the energy community, are very similar, very parallel in the two groups, and we see they are increasing, which indicates that people also use electricity for heating. And so then in December 2020, we implemented the energy community. And then, what we're interested in is of course whether we see a different consumption pattern afterwards. And as you can inspect from the graph here, well, the difference might not be too large. And we're going to analyze this, with some statistical methods. And you can imagine this setup lends itself to a difference in difference estimator, where here the post indicator variable just shows the effect on energy consumption after the implementation of the community. And then there's this interaction here. This is what really interests us, namely that is the difference in the consumption pattern after the community was implemented. And we see a negative sign. So the community tends to consume a little less energy, but it's not statistically significant at conventional levels. So overall, we would say that the implementation of the energy community did not lead to significant reduction effects. And then I have done one heterogeneity analysis where we analyze the differential effect across two groups or across one, or interacted with the environmental concern, and we see here that the conservation effect of the energy of belonging to the energy community is somewhat larger among people who are concerned about the environment. But still, overall, the effects are relatively small. Sorry. So this was already what I wanted to show you today. So our main purpose was to tackle the often cited limitation of selection bias in studies on electricity consumption. We only find a very small, or even we could say a null effect for energy conservation, which might be driven by the lack of involvement of people, like also Spyros mentioned as one of the challenges in this research domain. And I don't want to go too far with policy conclusions at this early stage of our analysis, but one could conclude that forcing communities may not lead to conservation effects, and so it's hard to maybe exogenously just create these energy communities. And I look forward to questions then later. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephan. A very, very interesting result, actually, with regards to energy saving through exogenous energy communities. Now it's the time for our last presenter, Mario Diana from ENEA, the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development. He has been with them since March 2013 as part of his activities in the laboratory which is called Communication Tools for Energy Efficiency. He has been interested in research for about 4 years on behavioral change issue with regards to the final uses of energy, collaborating also in projects of the Sustainability Department. Mario holds a master's degree in cultural anthropology and ethnology, and he will talk about a different community, a community that has a different fabric than the one Stephan described, and it is the one that is formed in schools. He will demonstrate actions to boost energy efficiency and indoor air quality in Italy. So we stay in Italy. Mario, the floor is yours.
So as you can see, I'm just one of the authors of these presentations. I will introduce better the rest of the group in a following slide anyway. And the work I'm presenting is based on several activities carried out by ENEA during the last 8 years in different Italian schools. So first of all, I'd like to introduce ENEA, the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development, and which is also the institution 3 of those who produced this report work for. ENEA, in fact, ENEA, among its activities, also carries out the promotion of energy efficiency and the achievement of ever higher levels of air quality in indoor environments. So, sorry, ecco. Now let's have a look at the research team as I promised. It's a team that aims to carry. It's a team that aims at developing research and proposals on human behavior in relation to technological tools. All this thanks to an interdisciplinary approach. As you can see, it is mostly made up of experts belonging to NEA, apart from Gaetano Settimo, who belongs to the Istituto Superiore di Sanità. So let's have a look now at the experiments carried out in schools. A short history first. By means of experimental campaigns since 2013, NEA has been developing the methodologies for evaluating thermohygrometric comfort, mainly depending on temperature and humidity values, as well as indoor air quality. The first activities foresaw also the development of sustainable solutions for improving energy efficiency, together with experimental protocols in the retrofitting projects. Why schools? School buildings were chosen mainly because they perfectly allow to study the achievement of satisfactory levels of comfort and air quality in a confined environment. When it occurs, in fact, indoor air pollution in school is a combined effect of physical, chemical, and biological factors, but it also depends on the level of environmental ventilation. It is in similar situations that the so-called sick building syndrome can develop and cause, in addition to a decreasing of attention, even the onset of diseases such as allergies, respiratory disorders, and headaches. So, in order to assess the thermohygrometric comfort and indoor air quality, networks of specific sensors and experimental campaigns were implemented. Sensors allowed to measure levels of temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, and volatile organic compounds. In addition to it, both a preliminary training on indoor air pollution and an active participation in the experimental activities were provided. All this in order to allow the students to adopt good practices. Students' active involvement essentially consisted in the collective compilation of daily diaries reporting their behaviors in classroom. This information were later synchronized with the data recorded by the sensors and detected by the operators. The final measurements reported the trend of internal temperatures and air quality within the classrooms during the class hours, in relation to the natural ventilation activity, as well as the type of and frequency of window openings. So, by matching students' diaries with sensors data, resulted now apparently trivial human actions such as correct and regular air changes can make a difference. Thanks to unaware management of ventilation, it was possible indeed to keep carbon dioxide levels below the acceptable values. It was also observed that generally the internal temperature kept an adequate and constant mean value, although outside the temperature were recorded even slightly higher than 0 Celsius degrees. So, based on these findings, the effectiveness of particular adoptive behaviors was inferred. In other words, comparisons between pre-post intervention results have been considered in order to validate the efficacy of the strategic drivers implemented to achieve profitable changes in students' behavior. More recently, anyway, in order to obtain more robust evaluations, the use of other quasi-experimental methods has been introduced through comparisons between intervention and control groups. This is what is being carried out right now in some schools in the south of Italy. Indeed, in order to prove the right causality between the strategic drivers used and the outcomes of a project, the samples to be compared must be as similar as possible before starting an intervention. Such a methodological approach is correctly guaranteed through the use of more strictly experimental methods, also known as randomized control trials, but unfortunately, not always the features of a project allow their implementations. So the importance of validating the effectiveness of the strategies applied in a behavior change program lies in the possibility to reproduce them with confidence in other interventions. In any case, the results of the projects achieved so far, in addition to provide information on the state of health of the investigated environments, have also opened up new questions and considerations that recall the importance of the related behaviors, such as their possibility to spread and reproduce both within and outside school, thus becoming viral. Such a possibility lies on the typical human predisposition that has been defined within the behavioral sciences through conceptual frameworks such as those of mimesis or social learning. Sorry. In a nutshell, such aptitude can be explained as the human ability to imitate and assume others' behavior. Moreover, according to the so-called theory of practice, we tend to embody cultural codes, that is, behaviors, through what we do practically in relation to others and with the objects that surround us and guide our actions. In other words, due to the human tendency to conform to ritualistic behaviors of the group or the others we come into contact with, new practices may be adopted. From this perspective, then, the students, subjects of the experimentations, may become vectors and multipliers of their own experiences in classrooms, acting on other students as well as on other social environment they frequent, such as family meeting places with peers, sports environments, and so forth. Finally, in order to boost the successful actions experienced during the implementation phase, periods of strategic reinforcements following the end of the projects may turn very useful. To this end, it might be helpful to keep operating for a follow-up period what turned out to be the effective strategy applied to achieve students' behavior changes. That is, the feedbacks they received by them through matching their actions described in the diaries with the sensors data detected by the operators. This could be accomplished by simply leaving installed sensors in the classrooms, so to let them provide real-time feedbacks now directly to the students themselves. Feedbacks in the end can be considered the real strategic driver implemented in the project so far. Also in accordance with the most validated taxonomy in literature, they can lead and reinforce later new behavioral habits, such as classroom ventilations. So, sorry, I didn't follow up the slide. So this, I just finished. This is my contacts if you want to have some information, some further information. I'm here available to be contacted and better explain what I try to communicate in this presentation.
Thank you very much, Mario, and thank you to all the presenters. Well, we have been allocated some extra time by our support team since we are running a bit late, and in order to allow some time for questions. If there is a specific question you would like to see answered, please type it in the chat. I've seen that there was a question to Kaisa that was already addressed by Yorgos Koukoufikis in the chat. And I have seen some interaction between Stephan Sommer and Christian Glöckner as regards the forced energy communities and their sense of identity. And I think that this is a very, very interesting outcome from this discussion. Mario, if you don't mind me asking a question regarding what you just described, do you see the school communities in Italy, since our main topic is energy communities, do you feel that they could I don't know, get organized and take part in actual energy communities? That question could go to Mario and Monica, if you don't mind.
Well, I try to give you an answer. See if I already got your question. Actually, my work is mainly focused on the behavior, not individual behavior, but on the way to spread and reproduce behaviors among other people, among other communities, among other groups through their contact. So I'm not precisely involved in community matters, not apart from in this sense that I try to explain here. I don't know if I made myself clear, if I answered properly to your questions. I don't know. Probably Monica can help me better in this.
Yes, in some cases of energy communities, especially in the southern Italy, there are some projects which want to create energy communities also with some schools, for example, by installing PV plants on the rooftop of the schools and try to connect public institutions, in this case the schools, with the neighbors, for example. So in this case, it's absolutely possible to see in the future this kind of of a process.
Great, thank you for this answer, both of you. Well, I just asked because I have seen it being considered in Greece in energy communities that involve local authorities as well. And the same way, the PVs on the rooftops of the school. So yes, it emerges as a common way of involving school communities and already formed communities into a greater energy community. Then if there is no other question, I don't know whether someone from the team of Kaisa, of the team of co-authors of Kaisa, could respond. Is anyone here? George?
Yeah, it's me.
Hello. So I was interested in what I saw in your abstract presentation about social innovation, and I wanted to see how did this team view the relationship between social innovation and technology innovation. Do you see a complementarity? Do you see competition?
Well, for sure, it's complementary in a way that in the energy transition, technology is an essential part of the social innovation project, because usually when we speak about social innovation in the energy transition, we have a part of it that is energy production, and that means that there will be technology involved. So especially in this field of social innovation, which relates to the energy transition, for sure we speak about complementarity, and that is also when we speak from a low tech perspective. We don't need necessarily high tech or new solutions. For example, in one of our case studies, we just had a very traditional setting where you created an energy source from biomass, but still you need some sort of technology to make that happen. So, of course, in this particular type of social innovation, technological innovation plays a big role.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Yorgos. Then, Dasha, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect. So, very glad to see your presentation on positive energy districts. And I was wondering, because of course you sample almost 1,500 people, but it is in Switzerland. So I was, you presented 4 segments. Have you considered the energy vulnerability? Results. I mean, for example, the reason why I'm asking this question is because with regards to car ownership, it has been shown that a lot of people who live in the countryside and have to commute, for example, to metropolitan areas for work, sometimes are subject to fuel poverty, transport fuel poverty. So I was wondering whether that detail was a part of your research.
Yeah, that's funny that you talk about that, because that was something I was really interested in exploring as well, especially fuel poverty in Switzerland. And we included several questions in the survey as a follow-up after the choice experiment that asked whether there were 3 different questions, and they all measured energy poverty in Switzerland or energy vulnerability in Switzerland. And we found just a very, very small number of people that answered those questions. And I forget already how many it was, but I think for the way that we calculated it, for example, energy poverty, I think on all 3 metrics, I think there was maybe like 9 people in the whole sample that had answered yes. But those questions were about whether your home do you feel that it's adequately warm, and are you in debt on your energy bills, or questions regarding those different types of topics. But in terms of more fuel poverty and mobility, that is something I've actually been interested in exploring a bit more in Switzerland. And yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think I will look into that a bit more.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting, and thank you for answering the question, because I mean, one of the guiding principles for positive energy districts is vulnerability. I mean, addressing vulnerability. So I think that it would be very good not to forget that, even in places where one wouldn't look.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll look into that. Thank you.
So thank you, Darja. Let me see. So with regards to Monica, I mean, I know I have already asked you the question regarding schools, but I was wondering, I saw in your table 10 energy communities in the north, and I can't remember how many in the south. Overall, how many energy communities?
Sorry, in total? Do you mean in total? Yes, 17 in total, 10 in the north, as you said before, and 7 in the south. So it's quite balanced, the total number of the energy communities so far, of course, because this process is really very recent, so it's really still in progress.
Okay. This is very interesting, because last time I checked the number of energy communities in of registered energy communities in Greece reached, I guess, 400 or something.
Okay.
So, of course, not all of them have their projects installed or on. They're just forming the institutional body. But I was very interested in the two southern examples
Yes.
that have to do with addressing energy poverty. And
Yeah.
you mentioned that one of them is in Messina. Do you
Yes.
think you could share a little bit more about it?
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
No, I say, do you think you could share a bit more about that energy community can be replicated in other areas of Italy that are
Okay, sorry.
energy poverty?
Yes, actually, the foundation which are promoting this and set up this very small energy community in Messina are trying to spread out other examples, other initiatives, quite similar, but really tailored in relation to other situation, other country and yes, and cities, especially in the southern Italy, because the goal is to fight against energy poverty and to increase the social cohesion through energy communities. So yes, in this case, this energy community in Sicily is a sort of a pilot project, a sort of experimental project to check some technical and social dynamics in relation to these wider goals.
Okay, that will be very, very interesting to follow for, I think, for all the similar type energy communities, especially in the European South. So we'll be following your research. And last, I have a question about institutional trust, and I would like to ask Spyros about it. Spyros, you mentioned interpersonal trust as one of the determinants for forming energy communities, and I wanted to ask whether you have considered institutional trust. And the reason I come to this question, for example, in Greece we have a law that was established very early in the, but it has changed a few times since its adoption in 2018. And do you feel that it can affect people who wish to enter the energy community schemes?
Yeah. I'm sure that institutional trust is a factor that has to be taken into account concerning our research. As I mentioned in the diagram presenting the determinants, the egoistic factors as well as the ethical factors that affect individuals' perceptions may be affected by other factors from their side. One of these factors is the institutional situation, and of course how it is perceived by its individual. If I could also note that within our research we aim to examine the level of trust that the potential participants have not only among each other, the participants within their community, but the level of trust that the participants have towards the other stakeholders or institutions, and I'm referring to the local authorities, regional authorities, public companies or private companies, and to see how this level of trust to the institutions, but to other types of stakeholders as well, can affect their final decisions for participation and investment.
Okay, thank you, Spyros.
Okay,
thank you. A last question to Stephan, unless someone from the audience wants to make any question. So I do not see that is the case. I see a lot of commotion in the chat, and thank you all for sharing your views. My question to Stephan is about energy saving in energy communities. You showed us that forced energy communities do not lead to energy saving actions or a reduction in consumption. But I was wondering, do you feel that participating in a renewable energy community, for example, sometimes make people prone to consume, doing their good deed towards the environment, and without realizing their increase in their consumption? So the fact that they get to use RES somehow makes them less keen on saving energy?
So part of your question was interrupted, but I guess you asked whether people can be induced to consume more after being supplied with renewable energy. Sort of a moral licensing argument. Louiza?
Yes, that was.
Yeah, very interesting question. I'm happy to take it. It's one of the questions we aim to analyze in this project. So we haven't really started the analysis in this regard, but it will be part of the analysis. Yeah, so I guess there won't be many households that produce electricity themselves via PV plants, for instance. So this channel we couldn't probably not pursue, but yeah, definitely we want to check whether people consume more after, I don't know, doing something like either like donating. Maybe that is a good deed that could allow them to, or license them to consume more energy afterwards, or something like that. But yeah, this is even more preliminary than the results I've shown so far.
Okay, Stephan, thank you for taking.
Thank you for the question.
Well, we have exceeded our time, and I can say I enjoyed very much this session, and thank you all for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. A big thanks to all our speakers, all our presenters. I will have to say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of the day, and see you tomorrow and in the next Behave conference. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks a lot for sharing.